Well, it's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown. It's been warm out there, what we call warm. It's been in the 90s, and it's been good tomato growing weather. Irene Bunsen, who always has the earliest, ripest, largest tomatoes in town, already has red tomatoes on her vine, red tomatoes, and it isn't even the 4th of July. Clarence, next door, her rival, could see them. He was watching her from out the upstairs bedroom window, scooched up with his binoculars, looking at her. She was down there working in her tomato patch, and he could see glimpses of red, reddishness, pinkishness. His tomatoes are still just buds. They're just little hard green things. And there hers were red. She had a pail of something. And for all the world, it looked to him through those binoculars as if she had a pail of ground beef. And she was taking pinches of it, and she was tucking it in down around each tomato stalk. Now, she's got these red stakes, red plastic stakes, that have black wires extending from them. Something new she's doing this year. But they stimulate the genetic material of the tomato plant through low-frequency radio waves transmitted into the ground. And now she was feeding them raw beef. Carnivorous plants. You can make plants carnivorous if you train them that way when they're young. He was curious about it. After midnight, long after Irene and Clint's lights were out, Clarence snuck over with a flashlight into her garden, and he looked at her plants. And he could see that the leaf of one was curled almost entirely up, and inside that leaf was a fly. It was dead. And it looked as if part of it had been digested already. And as Clarence put his finger on that leaf at midnight, he could feel it kind of wrap itself around him. A carnivorous tomato plant. He spoke to Leroy, the town constable, about it. He was in the sidetrack tap. He said Leroy was eating his hamburger for lunch. Clarence said, "You wouldn't think that maybe carnivorous plants, growing them in a garden, might be against the law in this town? I mean, I know carnivorous plants generally just eat flies and bugs, but they could move on to other things. And you think, what if a cat or a small child wandered into somebody's garden? And a plant that was unnaturally stimulated by low-frequency radio waves might kind of lunge toward a child." Leroy gave him that look that says, "Stop right there. I've heard more than I want to know." There was a new bartender in the sidetrack tap this week, Mr. Vogel from Avon, Minnesota. Nice man, quiet, gray-haired man, knew when to talk, when not to talk, experienced bartender. What nobody else knew but Wally is that Mr. Vogel is thinking about buying the sidetrack tap. The bar's been for sale, since 1983. And he's the first real prospect in about the last 3 years. Wally's been promising his wife Evelyn that they would sell the place. And when they do, they'd sell their house too. And they would get in their motorhome and they would head over the hill and they'd head west and south. And they would find the next chapter in their life, the chapter that comes after the chapter that's about hard work and sacrifice. The next chapter, the one that's about romance. But Wally is stubborn, and not everybody wants to pay $100,000 for a tavern in a little town that's gradually losing population, a dim little tavern that smells of beer and the mothballs in the urinals and the deep fat fryer. Mr. Vogel was the first one in a long time. He came in to look at the books. Wally stood behind him looking over his shoulder. He said, I don't want to lie to you, Mr. Vogel. I want you to know the true situation. He said, those books don't entirely reflect the accounting practices of this tavern. There's a good deal of income that does not go down into the books for reasons that I'm sure you can understand. The jukebox, for example, I own entirely. It's entirely my jukebox. I service it, and I keep the spare records in the back room. So all of that cash goes directly to me. I don't record that. I take that in directly. All of the boiled eggs and the pickled pig's feet, the dill pickles, my wife makes those at home, and that's all straight cash. That doesn't go through the register. The popcorn people pay for directly put money in the basket, and I don't mark that down either. I take that in directly, and tips, of course, as well, and certain other things. Well, Mr. Vogel said, how much income do you take in that's not here in the books? Well, that's hard to say exactly, Wally said. Many years it's the difference between going in the red and being in the black. Well, Mr. Vogel said, I'll take your word for it. He said, $100,000 is a little steep to me. I'm not saying it's not worth it, but it's a little more than I was prepared to pay. So he arranged that he should spend a week as a bartender to watch the business close up. And he also agreed to pay Wally $500 as an option, 90-day option for the purchase of the bar. $500. Money that Evelyn didn't know about. Wally figured it was time to get his pontoon boat back from the shipyard where it's been in dry dock, in repairs, for about the last 3 years, having the steering mechanism repaired. And then he got another $100 in rental of the pontoon boat from Dutch and Ronnie for a birthday party they wanted to give on the boat on a Friday. So he had $600. He owed the shipyard $1,500 to repair the steering mechanism, and he went down to the bank and he withdrew $900 from his and Evelyn's joint vacation savings account. They've been saving for a trip that he's promised her to go back to Munich and to Bavaria and to take a bus tour around southern Germany and see where her people come from. He took out $900 from that account, figuring that he would repay the $900 when Mr. Vogel pays him for the sidetrack tap. $80,000 if he's lucky. Margaret at the bank gave him a fishy look. She said, "You're still planning to go to Germany with Evelyn, aren't you?" "Oh, yes." He said, yeah. Oh, she said, "Well, I could, instead of giving you this in cash, I could give you this in a cashier's check if you need to put a down payment on the airline tickets. I suppose you're getting the cheap fares. You got to get those 30 days in advance, don't you?" Well, he said, "It's not till August. Plenty of time." She said, "I could give you an international cashier's check if you need to put a down payment on for that bus tour that you're going on in Germany." No, he said, "That's fine. Hundreds, 900s. She took her sweet time getting the cash out of the drawer. One of the disadvantages of banking in a small town, scrutiny. Big city, you want cash, you go to a machine, you stick a card in it, nobody looks at you crossways. So he got his pontoon boat and put it in the lake. He felt so great when he did. Loves that boat, 25-foot pontoon boat. Named it for his wife, the Evelyn B. She hates it. She won't set foot on it, which is just as well. He loves to be alone. It's got that nice cockpit, kind of a cockpit. It's got a wheel on a post. It's under a little canopy. Sits there in his lawn chair, puts his white captain's hat on. Beer cooling in the ice. Got a little tape deck. Play a little Sinatra. Play some Glenn Miller. It's like you're on a cruise. It's life. Oh, wow. It's so great. He just goes cruising slowly out across the lake. Feel the breeze in your face. Hear Sinatra singing. Drink a beer. Oh, man, that's living. It was when he did a favor for Pastor Inkvist, and he took those 22 Lutheran pastors on that boat. Years ago, that's when the steering mechanism got shot. He said, sure, I'll take him out for a cruise. He thought there'd be 10, 12 Lutheran pastors. No, sir, 22 of them. On this boat, they all got on the boat, and boy, that boat was riding low when the last one stepped off the dock. People on shore thought it was 22 men standing on the water drinking beer. It was okay as long as he kept the power up and she kind of planed forward on the pontoons. But then, don't you know, the grill tipped over and these hot burning coals came towards people and everybody milled over to starboard. And the coals just slid down the deck towards them. And the Evelyn B tipped up on one pontoon and 22 Lutheran pastors went overboard in 5 feet of water. That was when the steering mechanism got whacked all to pieces. $1,500 those Lutheran pastors cost him. And now here he headed back again, the captain, at the wheel of his boat. He cruised slowly up the east shore of Lake Wobegon, the side away from town, waving to a fisherman here and there. And when he found an inlet where nobody was, he steered his boat in and he anchored there. And he put a Julie London tape in the tape deck. And he looked around to see that the coast was clear. And he stripped off all of his clothes. And he slipped into the water, naked, skinny dipping, 65 years old. What a thrill. Can of beer sitting there for you on the pontoon, naked, floating in the water. Julie London, the sexiest singer in the Judeo-Christian world, singing to you. Sunshine coming down. A secret life. Nobody would guess this of this man, a former luminary in the Knights of Columbus, a former councilman, a pilot to Lutheran pastors, secretly a hedonist, swimming naked, listening to a woman sing. And when Mr. Vogel buys that tavern, he's going to see that town, Wally will, in the rear view mirror of that motorhome and head off and live a whole life like this. Business was kind of slow on the Monday and Tuesday that Mr. Vogel was working behind the bar. And then on Wednesday, Wally got the bad news. He got the bad news that the birthday party that Dutch and Ronnie paid him $100 to rent the Evelyn B for, the guest list included all of his regular Friday night customers. The place would be deserted on Friday night. He said to Dutch, you can't do this to me. Dutch said, we've been planning this for 2 months. So that was when the U.S. Naval Band was booked to play in the Sidetrack Tap on Friday night. That's naval spelled N-A-V-E-L. It's a 4-piece all-girl band. Girls in their 20s who wear a kind of a skimpy metallic top. It looks as if it could fall off at any moment. And black shorts and very, very taut midriffs. Girls with all kinds of colors of hair, some not seen in nature. He saw them at the Matador in St. Cloud. He went in to audition them on Thursday. The place was jammed with young men stripped to the waist. The place was packed with people. The music was just blindingly loud. But it was packed with people. Young men dancing the walleye. You jump up and down, straight up and down in the air, and then you're hooked, your head is twisted, and you run straight head on into a wall. You stand there, you flop around for a while. Some of them would flop up onto the stage, and the lead guitarist of the naval band would just put her front toe under and flip those guys back into the audience. They were so loud that Wally and the band's manager had to walk 2 blocks before they could talk business. He wanted $400. No, Wally said. There's no time for me to publicize this. It's Thursday. This is tomorrow night. I can only pay you $200. They settled at $250 to play 2 sets, to start at 9:30. 4-piece band. Bring all their own gear. Big stacks of speakers. Do you need all those speakers? Oh, yes, the manager said, we do. So the U.S. Naval Band came and played at the Sidetrack Tap. They came on Friday night. They set up and they started to play at 9:30. There were about 15 men there when they started, and the crowd rapidly dwindled. The women played loud, but more than that, they strutted and they swaggered on stage, and they sneered at men in a way that men in Lake Wobegon are not used to seeing women do. Gradually, one by one, the clientele found reasons to get up and leave until it was 10:15. The place was empty, and the naval band took a break. It was so quiet you could hear the ice melt in the pop machine. Mr. Vogel and Wally stood behind the bar. Well, Wally said, it's an investment. It pays off eventually in goodwill. Yep, Mr. Vogel said. Well, he said, don't see any sense of 2 of us being here. I might as well head for home. Got his cap off the hook, put it on his head. The last real prospect walked towards the door, turned, said, I'll be talking to you. Out he went. Evelyn called from home. She said, what's all that racket down there? Person can't sleep with that going on. And when are you coming home? He said, they're all done. They're just packing up. I'll lock up. I'll be home a few minutes. He could hear the birthday party down at the dock where the Evelyn B was tied up. They were singing Waltz Me Around Again, Willie. All of his customers. The band packed up, and by 10:30, 11:30, Wally had counted up everything, locked up, mopped the floor. Midnight, he headed home. He cut in through the alley. It was pitch black. He thought he saw a flashlight in one of the yards, but he wasn't sure. And then suddenly something came flying through the air at him. It banged against a garage and it bounced off, and he looked down and it was a tomato. It was a red tomato. And then he saw a figure in the backyard. He picked up the tomato and he flung it at the figure in the backyard. And that was how Irene Bunson's kitchen window got broken. Friday night. Pane of glass busted. The remains of a tomato, a red tomato, sitting there on the kitchen floor. Gary and Leroy were called. They came the next day. They looked around. They stayed for a decent period of time. About 4.5 minutes. In a small town, there are some things you just almost rather not know about people's lives. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking,
And all the children are above average.